Hey, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting the students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I work at IE Business School Publishing, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. Do you have something you'd like some help with? Ask our guests. Go to professorgame.com/question and get your question answered in a future episode. And we're back with Tracy and Jon. In the previous episode, we heard their stories of both fail and success. If you haven't heard the episode yet, I'd encourage you to pause here and go for episode 039 before moving on to this one. There's something else that I would like to get in this sort of the long, winded answers that we have for this section. And it's when you're thinking of creating a gamification for your class, whether that's for a class, for the whole season, or for whatever it is that you're going to create, do you follow some sort of process? Do you have a thought process that you follow when you're going to create these kinds of things for your class? Or is it a complete just brainstorming and see what comes up? I'd like to get into you guys' mind and see what's going on when you're creating these products.
I don't think that I follow the same process every time. I think mine's a lot of brainstorming, or I had the idea for Choose Your Adventure Lab when Jon and I were talking about 7 Wonders in season 2 of Game Level Learn. So right. A lot of my ideas, I think, come from when I'm talking to other people, or especially when I'm talking about the mechanics of a game. And then we'll be talking so in depth about those mechanics, my brain somehow just clicks that into place with chemistry, or something that I do in teaching all the time. And I think, oh, that's just like this thing that I do in my classroom. Why have I never tried to do set collection in my classroom? So mine usually is a lot of brainstorming, and then I try to sit down and do it all at once. So I've never, Jon mentioned he gamified an entire unit. I'm still working up to that. All of mine have been, smaller pieces, lessons, or, just my labs for the year. But I really try to sit down and even if it's just a first draft, to get it all out at once. And then share it with other people and listen to their feedback to try to make it better before I implement it with kids.
So I'm hearing there that, of course, you have all of the things that you have as any teacher, any professor has in their heads already because of the subject that you're teaching. Of course, you know a lot about the subject. And then, of course, you're playing games. You're talking about games in the podcast. You're experimenting with things that are going on almost in life, and that they come up. And of course, your brain in the background is having all these things going on, and you say, and it suddenly clicks, and then you say, well, this is something that maybe I could use in class.
Yeah.
And then is when you try to click back and say, well, how can I tie this to a learning objective? Was it the learning objective that I have? And you sit down immediately and start maybe writing things or sketching things out so that you can implement later and test, which is something fundamental that you said.
Right. Or if I can't, like I have little notes from when we recorded season 3, episode 1. Gain lab equipment as you do things. Quiz score determines outcome like a die roll. So these are like little things that I thought of, and I've been so busy with Governor School that I haven't had a chance to sit down and really look at them. But they're here on a piece of paper in front of my computer. So every time I sit down to do anything, I read them again. And as soon as I'm done with Governor School, I'm going to sit down and figure out how kids are going to gain pieces of lab equipment to do their labs. Right, like their loot. Like you have to pass this quiz and do this homework assignment. Ooh, you got yourself a burette. You can titrate now.
Yeah, right.
So
and
engagers
they need to realize that titration matters.
Yes,
right.
It does.
Yeah,
right. That's one of the benefits of this is that, well, I got this piece of loot. I don't really know what it's good for. Oh. Oh,
Oh,
I've
I
got a good
needed
one.
to
I
do
didn't even
the
know.
flab. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. So engagers, even if you're not recording your own podcast, there's many places where you can find inspiration. You can listen to this podcast. You can listen to Game Level Learn. There's many things you can gather from there. There's many books. You can play your own games. You can sit down with a colleague and talk about these things because you're excited about whichever game you're playing right now. And there's when ideas click. Sharing with other people, listening to other people. Anytime that you're exchanging is precisely when innovation comes in. So my suggestion from that would certainly be to expose yourselves to all these things so that you can gather the inspiration, again, from podcasts, from books, from YouTube, wherever you're going to gather your information. It's a great place to gather all that inspiration.
Yeah, my process very quickly is exactly the same as Tracy's. I'll play a game, and I'll be walking back to my car, and I'll have a kind of an epiphany. Oh, I bet I could do that in this way, or I couldn't use that, but I bet my colleague in the third grade could. Right. So I'm going to take this game down to the elementary school and say, what if you did something like this for vocabulary development, or what if you did something like this for literacy? What if you had students tell their own story, kind of like this, right? And, I read super extensively, in the very limited literature on this topic. And, I listen to podcasts, and I try to suss out other ideas. And I'm always playing games. Tracy and I have sort of come to the conclusion that one of the things that a teacher who wants to do this, the thing they really have to do is to spend some time just playing games, because that's going to help you to develop a game tool set where you're going to be able to make your own connections, like we're talking about here.
I completely agree, but I would also add it's not just playing, because being a gamer and a player is one thing, but also sitting back and reflecting, or during your gameplay, having that second processor going on and saying, well, what's going on in the game? What are the mechanics going on here? Why am I being motivated to go for that loop? For that loot, why am I going for the side quest instead of staying in the main quest? All those things are the things that you have to keep on thinking. What are these mechanics going on? Why are they using dice instead of just go for turns? Or those kinds of things, like reflecting and challenging what's going on, is something that you also have to be doing when you're playing games. But certainly playing games is absolutely important.
Yeah, for sure.
So now, Tracy and Jon, we normally go into what we call the second part of the interview, and this has a bit less of a story mode and a bit more of... Initially, we call them quick answers, but they're not really quick many times.
Quick fire questions.
They're rapid fire, but not really rapid fire. They're a bit less story mode. It's the route we've been taking lately.
Got it.
The first one is, if there's something that you would say... It could be a mechanic. It could be what you could call a best practice or something similar that you would say, well, if you're designing gamification, you could benefit from doing this or that, or for incorporating this or that into your design, or for starting off through . I mean, is there something that you guys would say is a best practice in that sense?
This might not be the answer that you're looking for.
Okay, no problem.
For me, the best for me right now, the best thing, the best practice for gamification is just trying it. I think for a long time, I thought, oh, this is too hard. It's too much. I don't know what to do. Just do it. Just try it. Make something. A 15-minute lesson, a 60-minute lesson. You've got to try. I hear a lot of people talk about gamification a lot, but I don't see very many examples of gamified lessons or units. And I think it's because we all like to talk and brainstorm, but we need more. I need more of just doing it.
Yeah, and it's the same thing. I've heard many times that we're starting to teach the kids and the students to be more of risk takers and to go for it. But we have to go for it as well. We have to risk it as well. We have to lead by example and say, well, I'm going to tell you to risk it, to go for it, to try an answer. I'm going to do it as well. And I might not have every single answer right, and that's okay. I can fail. Right. We can learn together in the process. but it means that I'm still going to risk it. I'm still going to go for it because I'm doing it for you, because I'm doing it to give you a better education, to help you learn better, to enjoy your education, and to have beautiful memories instead of thinking that school was a jail that you couldn't get out of until you made it to your 18th birthday. So
yeah, exactly.
that's something that I think is beautiful, and just go for it is certainly a very important advice, and that we don't get enough of that ever.
Yeah, I mean, I totally second, Tracy's point, that we've got a lot of people, in different parts of, the world experimenting with this. But oftentimes what they're experimenting with is the incorporation of sort of pre-written educational video games into their curriculum, which is scarcely better than doing a worksheet on Excel rather than on a piece of paper, right? What Tracy and I talk about, we talked about this throughout the second season of Game Level Learn, is what you really want to do is figure out the mechanics that make games really work, and then exploit those mechanics so that when you do your own thing, it really resonates for students, because the games that we're playing resonate. And so for me, I think the best practice is always think first about your learning objective. Never lose sight of that. Never put the game in front of what you want your kids to be able to do. And then, be appropriately ambitious in your designs. If what you need is a 60-minute lesson, design one. Don't design a 15-minute lesson. Be ambitious. And really think about games that you understand and that and you feel comfortable with, so that when inevitably something goes wrong in class, you don't feel like, oh, the gamified method let me down. Nothing let you down. You tried something that was a little above your, a little too ambitious. Don't be too ambitious. Be appropriately ambitious.
That scale is one I want to buy. Do you know if they sell on Amazon?
Yeah, right. I say this as a person who never, ever gets it wrong by being insufficiently ambitious. I'm always too ambitious, but that's me. I have to be me.
Definitely. And that's key. And you mentioned something as well, John, of getting into something, for example, when you're talking about a theme or a narrative or whatever you're going to involve your gamification into. If you, for example, you're definitely not a Harry Potter fan, then don't do Hogwarts. I mean, there's many things you can build around instead of doing Hogwarts.
Also, if you're not a Harry Potter fan, you might be a monster.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Welcome to Team Voldemort. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. So again, if you're not into RPGs, then don't go for RPGs. If you're not a sports fan, don't use the sports metaphor. Use something that you're comfortable with, and of course, always think as well in your players and your students. But don't do something that goes against what you enjoy, because otherwise you're going to be suffering, and the kids will know.
Yeah. They're going to suffer too, because you're not really into it. Even if something isn't going as planned, if you as the teacher are totally into it, by and large, your kids will be totally into it too. Right. And they'll be able to say, I don't think you meant that to work like this, did you?
Right.
Yeah, no,
I think,
that didn't go right.
I'm used to working with teenagers, so I don't know what kind of reaction younger kids give. But for teenagers, generally, your effort means something to them.
Yes.
So when they see that you're excited and that you're trying, they're willing to forgive, being guinea pigs, where things might not go perfectly the first time.
Right. Yeah. They're prepared to forgive a fair amount.
Right.
If you have put in your full commitment, Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not just the effort, it's a commitment, and that shows for sure. I mean, you can see when somebody's fully committed and fully into something, and when he or she is not.
Right. And you have to be able to explain why you've chosen to do what you've chosen to do. Tracy and I have both worked with a colleague back in Pittsburgh who teaches entrepreneurship. We've both played with his students a cooperative game called Letters from Whitechapel, which is about the police hunting Jack the Ripper in the 1880s. And we play it with his students solely so that we can observe how effectively they collaborate as a team.
And communicate.
Right?
Yeah.
And Tracy, I'm sure will agree with me when I say, if you are an effective collaborating and communicating team, you have a chance of catching Jack, but only a chance. If you are ineffective at communication or collaboration, you're done. You'll never catch him.
Yeah.
Right. The game is hard, right? So in this case, this is sort of game-based learning. Play that game right out of the box, or games like it, Shadows over Camelot. There's others like it. I just like Whitechapel because it's really pure. You play that, and you're playing it, but what really matters is the debriefing afterwards, where you ask students to evaluate each other as communicators and collaborators, and you have independent faculty who are in the fishbowl on the outside observing, so that they can say, hey, Andrew, you're really good at puzzle deciphering and problem solving, but you don't actually communicate your findings to your team, so they don't get your benefit. You need to get better at that. Oh, I didn't realize I did that. Yeah, it's not, it's a thing, but you can fix it, and you probably should, right? It's that kind of thing.
And teams and entrepreneurship are something that goes hand by hand. So
totally, yeah, right.
It's totally related to the topic. Yeah, it's not out of the hat.
Right. Yeah, I'm teaching that presently at my school in Orange County in California, and I use the game, and it has the same basic effect. An effective team has a chance of catching Jack, and an ineffective team, just hopeless. But the game's hard.
So hard.
So talking about hard things, I'm sure that you'll find this is probably one of the most hard questions, and the question is, what is your favorite game?
Oh, you're killing me. Tracy, you're first.
I'm going to say 2 or more. For sure. I'm having a very Lovecraft moment right now. I cannot get enough of Call of Cthulhu, the role-playing game. I think I could play it all day, every day for weeks and weeks on end. I also am really loving the Arkham Horror card game, which is essentially Call of Cthulhu Light.
Right.
So, but I think the Arkham Horror card game is more accessible for people who don't have the time to play, even one-shots of Call of Cthulhu. So that's what I'm going to say are my favorite 2 games right now.
Beautiful. Yeah. You made it.
Yeah.
Challenge accepted and, succeeded. So, John.
That's a hard one. I'm a big fan of word-based games. So games like Codenames, Password. Tracy will, Tracy will tell anyone the stories about what a dreadful clue giver I am in Codenames. I'm easily the worst, right? But it's super fun. And Codenames, by virtue of its very simple mechanics, is, I think, one of the great starter games.
Yeah.
If you're going to gamify, right? Every discipline has its own unique vocabulary. So teach students the vocabulary of biology by playing Codenames. It's all Codenames is about is this word association. So you want students to be able to associate, say, a ribosome with mitochondria, because it's both, and they're both organelles or something like that, right? So I'm a huge fan of that. And what else do I love? I'm a big fan of German dexterity games.
I was just going to say you love dexterity games.
I love dexterity games. I love them all. I think my favorite is a game called Villa Paletti, where you're building a structure out of these sort of rods and other sort of pieces. The taller the structure gets, the more unstable it gets. A dexterity game is sort of hard to see how you're going to gamify it. But if you want to use a German-style game as an icebreaker, a dexterity game, you can't go wrong. Everyone knows how to play a dexterity game. And everyone's always interested in watching it because they're so tense. From a role-playing perspective, like I said, I've been playing a lot of Numenera, and I write for a company that publishes a game called Harp. I write a lot of sort of doing culture work in role-playing games. So I do that sort of as a spare time thing. I love game mastering. I've done it since I was really a little kid.
That's part of being a gamification master as well. Being a game master in a way is a fundamental skill that you might develop with time.
Yeah, Tracy and I were talking about that when we were at Origins a few weeks ago.
I maintain that all teachers are game masters.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Whether you're a good game master and the game is well designed, that's a different topic.
Right.
Yeah. In the third season of Game Level Learn, there will be one of the episodes is essentially you are a teacher, therefore you are a game master.
Yeah.
So that's coming down the road.
I
mean, my problem is that there are very few games that I dislike. There's almost nothing I won't play.
Right.
So
I'm
like,
trying to think of a game I don't like.
Yeah, there's very few.
Yeah.
And so since I'm always interested in sort of evangelizing, if someone wants to try something, it's like, of course I'll teach you how to play that. It's not my favorite, but it might be yours.
And that's the beauty of the variety that we're getting lately in board games, card games, video games, role-playing games, you name it.
Yeah. In video games, I play World of Warcraft. Still, I've played it for a long time now. I mostly like leveling and sort of light sort of noodling. I just like the way the world looks, so I like to interact with it, Mostly video games, the ones that I play are about experience. I'm not so interested in first-person shooters. I like role-playing, Elder Scrolls, that kind of thing. One of my favorite games of all time, video games, is called Journey, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful experience. It's not a very long game. It takes maybe a couple hours if you're not very good at video games like me. If you're good at it, you could do it in maybe 35 or 40 minutes, but you'll have an extraordinary character-based aesthetic experience. The music to the video game Journey, just about some of the most beautiful music I've heard composed in the last 10 years. Just love it. Oh. Yeah.
You gave 7 favorite games.
Yeah, sorry. This is what we do. Every time we make our own podcast episodes, we're like 25 minutes.
An hour and a half later.
An hour and 20 minutes later,
So the next thing, and I don't know if you've heard any of our previous guests, but is there anybody that you would say you would enjoy listening to in an episode like this one in Professor Game?
Huh.
That's a great question.
It could be straight from the gamification world, in education, not in education. It could be in, I don't know, it could be in game design. It could be somebody who's an innovator in a way that you think could be interesting. I don't know. Is there somebody that you would enjoy?
I'd love to hear the designer of the game Freedom: The Underground Railroad.
Oh, good one.
Yeah, I'd love to hear him talk about his process and how he designed that game and why that, and taking very unpleasant things about a nation's history and bringing them into a kind of game context. Every country has things that are in its past that the country should not be proud of. Or that indeed people aren't proud of. And games are a way to explore what those stories and legacies are in a very compelling way. At least I think so. And the Underground Railroad is really about America's relationship with slavery. And, the United States and slavery go way back. And there are very difficult things about that game that you have to do that relate to the Slave Act that I find very, very compelling from a debriefing and discourse perspective. I mean, and you're in Spain, so you've got there's any number of things that you might select that would be the same kind of thing. I don't know if in the Spanish game market there's any of that kind of historical work, but I'd love to talk to him, or I'd love to hear him. Is what I mean. Yeah,
Tracy, do you have a candidate?
Well, mine was going to be the writer of Pandemic, just
Matt
because
Leacock.
Matt Leacock, just because I've used it so much in class, and it's such a great model for the spread of epidemics. I just be really curious to hear, what kind of research he did. It's a brilliant cooperative game. I just think I'd be interested to hear what he has to say and what he thinks about people using it now for education and things like that.
Beautiful. Those are great suggestions and very well justified as well.
Yeah.
So the related to this question, it's very, very near and very near and dear, so to speak. Is there any book that you would recommend?
John's book.
Aside, of course, from John's book, which we would definitely recommend.
The one by, what's her face?
Jane McGonigal.
Jane McGonigal.
Super Better or The Reality is Broken?
Reality is Broken. That was the first book I really read about gamification that John recommended.
It's funny. Sorry to jump in. That
No.
especially around the time that she wrote that book and that it was very famous and people were talking about it and talking about gamification, she was actually saying that she didn't like gamification. She didn't like the term. She didn't like people saying that they were sort of game designers who weren't really game designers. She said, game design is game design and that's it. She's kind of shifted a bit that, and she's been into gamification conferences, but she even went to gamification conferences to say that she wasn't agreeing with all this whole thing of gamification. But it was a very, very neat and interesting perspective that she had on that. It's been shifting a bit, and of course the gamification world has been changing as well. But it was funny that she had those thoughts back in the day, and saying that basically a book that is recommended for gamification, the author is somebody who said, no, this is not exactly what we like to do.
Yeah. And she can think whatever she likes.
Oh, definitely.
At the end of the day, when I read her book, I was like, oh, okay, I can see. Yeah. I can see some of how this might lead to new ways to think about motivating students.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to go on a complete sidewalk over here. And just a very quick story. I had a language teacher starting the university that we had literature more than language. And the teacher said, the professor said, like, oh, yeah, read these readings. So he had like 10 readings. So the first 9, you could see the author, who it was. And it was about these. I can't even remember what they were about. But then you had the 10th reading. And the 10th reading looked like it was like a briefing of the past 9. And you couldn't see the author. And of course, the author was the professor himself. And then in the exam, he asked you to analyze, without knowing that he was the author, to analyze this final article that he sent to us. And it was funny because Brutal. At some point he said something like, literally he said, well, that's not what the author meant. And it's like, just as you said, I don't know, and I don't really care what you meant by that. That's what's written here, and that's what I'm interpreting, and that's what it's about. We made fun of that class awesome. Like for weeks and months after we had it, but it was like, I don't care what you think about what you wrote down, and I don't need to get into your mind. You wrote it down, and that's the purpose of it. So I completely agree, John. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. The moment you write it, it doesn't matter what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. The book that I found most transformative to me as I was moving on the journey to write my own book was a book called Game Frame by a guy named Aaron Dignan, Dignan. He's more writing for a business audience than an education audience, but I found his understanding of games, motivation, experience design, I might call it. I found it unbelievably compelling when I read it.
Beautiful.
I would recommend his book.
Yeah. In fact, I haven't heard it before, but talking about experience design, this instructional designer is quickly shifting into, and I like more the term of learning experience designer. It makes a lot of sense because you're designing a learning experience for students. It's not just you putting down this after that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, again, he's writing more for sort of a business market than an education market. But for me, when I was reading it, the parallels were so obvious that I can remember getting done with that book. And this doesn't happen all the time in nonfiction. I can remember I was reading it on a train, and I got off, and I was just like, I had a spring in my step as I was going up the stairs to the street level. I was like, oh, that book was so great, So check it out.
Fantastic. I will add it to my list, certainly. And now an exciting question, I'm sure you will find it interesting to respond, is what is Tracy's and John's superpower when creating gamification?
I think mine is risk-taking.
Superpower, definitely.
Yeah, I really think just the fact that I try and put it out there.
Yep.
The only way to achieve something great is to try it, so
that's
definitely.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I've got a sort of like a mastermind kind of thing. Like, why do it at this level when you could be extra ambitious?
So you're like extra man.
Yeah, like Ultraman. Something like that. I don't know. And maybe it's risk taking of a different kind. I don't have any trouble just putting it out there. Right? I don't have any trouble going, being at the front of the line. with people shooting arrows at me in the back. It's fine.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, maybe it's the same, Trace. Maybe that's why we get on so well, is because we both have the same approach to risk taking. It's like, yeah, bring it on. Bring it on.
Let's do this.
Yeah. Maybe it's a naivete or a courage or both, or I don't know.
A mix, probably.
A mix, yeah, right.
This is a slightly gamified question that we make in the podcast. The idea here behind the whole question is that I get questions from the audience. I filter some of them, because if somebody asks what your name is, it's not going to be interesting to answer in the podcast. So I do have a slight filter, and then I put them into a huge list and I randomly select one. I click on a button, something comes up, and the good thing is that you'll know it makes sense. It's not just a random, I don't know, question.
It would be even more fun if it didn't make sense.
So, okay, I was stalling a bit because it takes a couple of seconds for the question to come up. And here we have it. This person says, I've been studying gamification for a while, reading books, listening to podcasts, and reading blogs. I would like to get started, maybe not immediately, but not in 2 years either. So what would you recommend as a next step? And this, I think it has a lot to do with what we've been talking about today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think it's safe to assume that this person is playing a ton of games?
Playing games, for sure. I'm not sure it's a ton of games. Depends on what you believe is a ton of games.
We're probably not the best
thermometer for that.
Yeah.
So I think the next steps are play some more games that you've never played before. And what we've been talking about, find someone to talk with about those games. Whether that's someone online, but instead of just listening, find someone that you can personally talk to about those games or how those games might connect to what you are interested in gamifying.
Like getting the thoughts out of your head, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. So stop just thinking, start verbalizing them, and then write some of the golden nuggets down that result from that conversation.
Yeah. Tracy couldn't be more right on this. What this person needs to do is pick a lesson objective that isn't something that's going to take 10 classes to get to. Yeah. Pick a lesson objective you can do in one class. Then go to the Game Level Learn Facebook group. Go to GameLevelLearn.com. Email me. Email Tracy.
Sign up for the new Discord.
Yeah, sign up for our new Discord group on Game Level Learn.
I'm trying to build a learning community where people can talk about these things.
Yeah, Tracy's right. There is a huge community of gamifying educators that you just need to tap into. I answer email every week from people who've read GLL stuff or have listened to the podcast or gone to see me present somewhere. And I'll give 10, 15 minutes to anyone. We're trying to build a community. We're trying to build a movement here. And so this person should email me or email Tracy or email both of us. Or
email you. Yeah.
Right, or email you.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Or put a comment thread on one of the stories that we've written at GameLevelLearn.com, or post a question on the Facebook group, or send a note to us on Twitter, or. But what you shouldn't do is just sit by yourself wondering how to make this happen, right? If you get Tracy on the phone or on a Skype for 10 minutes, I assure you are going to leave saying, "Oh my God, I've got the coolest stuff I can do now." Right? And we're building a movement, so we're here.
Definitely, that's beautiful advice, and it's nice to know as well that you're very open to getting questions, because that's one of the things that we also ask for our guests at the end of the interview, to let us know where we can connect, where if the audience has any questions, something else that they might be interested in, how can we get back to you and make those questions. And seeing that you're very open, we will certainly share that. By the way, everything that we've been talking about, in case you haven't seen it before, it will be in our show notes. I provide very detailed show notes, more than the typical ones in that sense. So they will be definitely in professorgame.com. If you type Tracy or if you type John, you will certainly find that on the show notes. Any links that you've been sharing, any of the games, I'll try to find them all. And the ones that I can't find, I'll ask John and Tracy again.
Yep.
So we'll have them there for you. So anything that you can find there, you can find it on the webpage. You can go, of course, to gamelevellearn.com. They have a Facebook group, which is fantastic and growing as well. There's many things that you can do, and going out there and finding other people to talk to is something fundamental. And if you feel you're an introvert and you don't want to talk to all these strangers that we are, you can also go and talk to your friends. I'm sure you have somebody who's interested in games as well, who might be interested in doing these things. So go out there, get that, get the thoughts outside of your head. I mean, there's this creativity professor that we have very close to us, and one of the things he says is, don't think about your ideas. When you're in a brainstorm, you have to write them down, and then they start making sense or not, but you get them out of your head and you stop thinking about them and think of the next thing. If you want to have 10 ideas, you can't have them all at the same time in your head. You have to write them down and leave them there so they rest. And your head rests and gets the next thing.
That's right. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more with your advice of getting the things out there, whether it's written, whether it's talking to somebody else. You can even start a blog if you want and just type out your ideas and get feedback from people. There's many things that you can do, and I just invite you to pick one of the things that we've said, or come up with something else and put your ideas out there, exchange with other people, talk about it, and you'll get many ideas and beautiful things that you'll be able to implement very soon.
Agreed. Couldn't agree more.
Fantastic. So is there any final piece of advice you would like to leave the engagers with? And then we'll talk about how we connect with you, and then we'll say it's game over.
I know it's not possible for everybody, but play all the games.
Yep.
As much as you can. I know it's hard. Jon worked really hard here in Pittsburgh to build a really nice gaming community that I was very happy to inherit when he moved back to California. So I'm very lucky. I play games every single weekend. I also am single and have no children to look after.
That helps, I'm sure.
I have the time to do all these things. But there are gaming communities where you live. There are gaming communities online. So I really, even if it's just once a month, try to get out there and play a new game that you've never played before, because it's just all extra information for gamification. It's, new mechanics, same mechanics in different ways.
Yep.
You're just building your knowledge base.
Couldn't agree more. If you want to do this, you got to get out and play the games. You're never going to be able to design an efficient or even rational leveling scheme for players to learn about math if you've never played a game that has leveling.
Right.
You're never going to be very good at generating role-playing experiences for students if you've never done role-playing games. So get out there and play. You don't have to play everything. You should, but you don't have to. Get out there and play all of the games.
All the games.
But you really need to be effectively engaged in the game side of gamified instruction. Just as you are in the instructional side. Go to professional development where you might hear a speaker or two, pitch the idea of going to a game convention as professional development. What are you going to do? I'm going to play games for 4 days.
Yeah.
What? That doesn't sound like PD. Oh, let me tell you the ways in which it is. Those kind of things.
Beautiful. Finally, we've been talking and going around this for a while, but where is it, like maybe the home base or 2 or 3 places where we can get back to Jon and Tracy? That I don't know, it could be the webpage, gamelevellearn.com. I don't know if you want to give your Twitter. I don't know, whatever you feel is best to get in touch with you two.
I think the easiest one is the Facebook, the Game Level Learn Facebook page.
That's how we got in contact.
Yeah, yep. And because my phone sends me notifications, so I'll see them immediately. I am trying to build a Discord community. So far, it's a community of 2. Jon and Tracy. Maybe a lot of people don't know. Maybe people don't know what Discord is. It's just, it was designed for online gamers to be able to chat with each other. But you can, do type chatting, voice chatting in there. And if we can get some people in there, we can have some conversations, and it can just be a place for people to talk about gamification. That link is on the Facebook page.
Yep. Yeah, I'm going to agree with Tracy. The Facebook group has got more than 1,600 members. You put a question up there, people will respond to it. The main page, gamelevellearn.com, has new written content virtually every week. The podcast, the 3rd season will be out. Episode 1 will be out in a couple of days. Email, I give my email address at the end of every episode, Jon Cassie @gmail.com. Twitter @Jon Cassie. I'm more a Facebook user than a Twitter user, but I use both.
Same, yeah.
Yeah, so any of those places.
Beautiful,
but
fantastic.
like I said, I answer email. I just did a conversation for about 20 minutes yesterday with a couple of guys in Denver, and we're working together on an idea for a 6th grade language arts class that if it goes the way that I think it will go, then we've got something that we could really bring to the market in a way that similar to some of those sort of escape room boxes,
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's just because these guys saw a presentation I made. They reached out to me and I said, well, what do you think about this, guys? Or how about this? Or how about this? Oh, that sounds cool. All right, then let's work on that.
Let's go for it. Definitely.
Yeah,
I guess that's the theme of the episode. Let's go for it.
Let's go for it.
Yeah, exactly. That's totally our mantra.
Fantastic. Thank you again for all your generously giving your time for this interview, through your podcast, through your webpage, your Facebook group, etc. Thank you for all of that. But now it's time to say it's game over.
Game over.
Meow, meow.
Bloop, 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 bloop. Elf is about to die. Valkyrie shot the
Maybe
food.
it's game over because we won.
Yay!
Great teamwork.
Thank
Thanks.
you
It
so much.
was super fun.
Yeah.
Hey, Engagers, thank you for listening to Professor Game Podcast. If you want more details of this interview with Tracy and Jon, then all you have to do is go to professorgame.com/podcast/040 because this is episode 40. You'll also have episode 039 with their details. There you can also subscribe, and that way we will be in contact and you'll have exclusive access to opportunities that Professor Game might have for you. And before you go on to your next mission, would you like to know how to get started with the gamification project for learning? Then you have to listen to Eliza Hutchman in the next episode. So go ahead and subscribe using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there!